Now it's time to hand over to Meera. She is the UX strategist here at Cyberdoc, and she'll be talking about the UX strategy and content strategy for Drupal 9. Meera, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Shiv, and thanks everybody for joining. We could go to the next slide. So we know that simply having a website is no longer enough, and to maximize the potential of your site, you definitely do need to take into account the user experience, and this includes everything from how people navigate on the site to how they come away feeling. So it is a balancing act, meeting modern users' experience expectations of being intuitive, engaged, and personalized, as Tim mentioned earlier, while also maintaining a robust and flexible platform. And from what we've heard, this is something that Drupal can help achieve. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I would encourage you to do, especially as you start looking into updating to Drupal 9 and migrating content across, so you can take advantage of some of the new and improved Drupal features. Next slide. So you can't design something for users if you don't know who they are. Start with quantitative research and look into your existing analytics to develop some hypotheses around what issues people may be experiencing on the site and why. So here we ask what does the hard data tell us? What are the most important or popular pages, or the least accessed pages, and what are people looking for? Qualitative research, so whether this is in-depth user interviews or user studies, they help you go deeper to listen and get insights and test all your newly formed hypotheses. And here we ask why. Why do different users feel a certain way? What are they trying to accomplish, and why are they trying to accomplish? What are their pain points and frustrations? And you can start thinking about some of the solutions that may solve these pain points and help them meet their needs. Also, you can do some usability tests on your sites to diagnose things that already exist, and issues that people struggle with. And you can also test your hypothesis on any new concepts and designs. Now that you have all your data and insights and you know a fair bit about your users, I'd recommend mapping your customer journey step by step. So essentially, a journey map tells a story of the customer's experience with your brand or your product or your service, and helps you understand the website interaction in context. So where are people coming from? How do they interact with the company at every key stage? What are their offline influences, experiences, and dependencies? All of this impacts how they interact with your website and can highlight any opportunities you have to improve the overall experience. And one thing I would definitely add here is, from a UX perspective, a journey map should never be a deliverable. It's a living document that needs to keep evolving and developing as you acquire new insights. The next thing to look at is the content strategy for the website. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that content is no longer just a byproduct of website design. It's fundamental to a good user experience. So I'll call out some of the key points that are important to consider at any time, but especially when you're focused on reviewing and migrating web content. So the first thing is definitely make sure there is a user need. Your user research will help you understand what these are. And this is an established practice in content design. For instance, on gov.uk, which a lot of you may have used, every single piece of content should meet a valid user need before it's even published. And so the follow-on point here is, if you go next, is to give users easy access to the content they need, not the content you think they need. The next. But the reality is that often you will have instances where content cannot be rewritten. It's there for a legal reason, or it needs massive rounds of approvals, or you have tight deadlines. And so where you can't rewrite it or change it fundamentally, you need to make sure you're adding summaries, structured headers, and adding a hierarchy, good quality tagging, layouts, and styles to make sure that people can find it easily, to make sure that the right terms that help it from an SEO perspective are being used. And they also help users scan the content much quicker. And definitely you need to be reusing consistent design elements. So when a user arrives on the page, they know exactly what to expect from a layout, where the summary sits, where the sidebar is, what they can probably expect at the end of the page. An approach I would encourage you to take when reviewing the website content is definitely be ruthless. So the next point, think about what you really need to keep and maintain. Major reductions in content volume will not only help users, but they'll also help prevent any content debt and repeated work by content creators and editors. And you can use the Moscow prioritization technique, so the must have, should have, could have, won't have at this time, to prioritize and retire content that doesn't have any user need or acceptance criteria. And I would encourage you to do this with stakeholders. You can also use user research and analytics to test and validate your assumptions as you go through this exercise, particularly around high and low traffic pages and journeys. Yeah, I mentioned the analytics. And finally, the last point, make sure you've engaged all the relevant stakeholders, particularly where you have multiple teams and people involved in the creation and approval of content. Because you might decide that you're not going to keep this piece of content or change what is reflected on a website, but there might be a lot of offline workflows and processes sitting behind it. It might actually be somebody's job to be regularly going in and updating that content. And so when you're thinking about content strategy, you do need to think about the knock-on impact of any of these decisions you make. I mean, just like content, interaction design, and web performance, accessibility is a core consideration when creating and running websites. And so it's really heartening to hear that a lot of the work that Drupal's been doing around accessibility will help support this, because improving the usability for everyone on the web is important. And it includes 4 broad parameters that you can see here. One is visual, making it easy for people to see content; auditory, making it easy for them to hear, making it easy for people to use; and cognitive, making it easy for people to understand. Setting aside the morality of inclusive design and accessibility, organizations who neglect accessibility are probably at legal risk now as well. So as a starting point, I would encourage doing an accessibility audit, either in-house or maybe using third-party testers. And this can be both automated and manual testing against standard web content accessibility guidelines criteria. What you can do to improve accessibility is a whole separate talk, which I'm not going to do here, but I'll call out a few things. So ensure that all the functionality and navigation is keyboard accessible, because it's not just people with screen readers who use keyboards. It's also for people maybe who don't have a mouse or who can't use a mouse. Or as you can see, like in the United Nations screenshot there, having a simple and clear navigation bar and a menu not only helps users travel to where they need to go on the site, but also gives them a summary of what they can expect to find. And things like breadcrumbs and consistent page titles help people orient themselves. And these are simple things you can use to improve the overall experience of the site. Good page content, hierarchy, and structure also helps people understand which text is most important. And having clear and concise headers and subheaders make the page easy to skim. This and similarities in layouts on similar pages helps users consume content easily and find what they're looking for quickly. So for instance, that screenshot there you see on your right, that's IMDb. It's always laid out in the same place. You know where to go to find cast information, where to find storyline information. And as you start thinking about structuring your content in a consistent way, it helps people use the content and engage with your site much faster. And finally, make sure text meets minimum size requirements. It has adequate contrast and can be enlarged. So, you know, using images to present text is a no-no. Make sure text alternatives are provided for all images. And you can do things like providing transcripts for audio and video content and ensure that these can be paused. They're not just automatically playing when you load the page, and that there are volume controls. So these are just some of the things to take into consideration, and hopefully this has been useful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Meera. That was very, very insightful again. And I think I can speak for all of us here that we all agree and applaud the work that Drupal are doing within the UX community and for users across the world, and making sites more accessible and really raising the bar and the standard for people to not just access websites regardless of their abilities, but also to empower users and to create really powerful websites too. So very, very insightful. Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions coming in from our audience here on Zoom. Yes, we have a question. Let's have a look. So James Sandon has asked, for UX, do I provide text alternatives or for all images? Meera, I think that's a UX question you could answer.
Yeah, so I can take that. So not all images, but for instance, sometimes we might be using images that are just there for a decorative purpose. It's a stock image that's just sitting there. You don't need to add all text for those kind of images, but definitely ones where, you know, something in context, if that's important to the article or the page, then you should definitely be providing that.